The great hall was silent. Thousands of alien beings sat in their seats, watching. Their eyes, some with many pupils, some glowing with strange light, all looked down at the single human woman standing in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Elena Vasquez kept her back straight. She had done this before. Her mother had done this. Her grandmother had done this. For 300 years, humans had stood in this exact spot, asking the same question. The United Earth government respectfully requests full membership in the Galactic Council, Elena said. Her voice was calm. She had practiced these words 1,000 times. High Arbiter Shurath sat on his throne above everyone else. He was old, very old. His gray skin was covered in deep lines, and his eyes showed no emotion. He had heard this request many times before. The council will now vote, he announced. Elena watched as lights appeared on the massive display screen behind the Arbiter. Red lights, one after another. 47 species, 47 votes. All of them red. Denied. The Vellani representative made a sound that might have been laughter. His body was tall and thin, covered in scales that changed color with his mood. Right now, they were bright purple. Amusement. Perhaps the humans should try again in another century, he said. When they have learned their place. Elena did not react. She had expected this. Every human ambassador before her had received the same answer, the same insults, the same looks of contempt from beings who thought themselves better than humanity. The Council thanks Earth for its continued interest, Shurath said. His voice was flat, bored. Your application remains indefinitely deferred. Elena bowed her head slightly. The Council's wisdom is noted, she replied. Then she turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, she could hear the aliens talking among themselves. Some laughed. Others simply returned to their own business. To them, humanity was nothing. A young species, aggressive, dangerous, best kept locked away in their little corner of space. For 300 years, Earth had been quarantined. Humans could not leave their home system. They could not colonize other worlds. They could only trade at special stations, watched carefully by Council security forces. They were prisoners in their own solar system. The official reason was always the same. Humanity was not ready. Too violent. Too unpredictable. The galaxy needed to be protected from Earth's chaos. Elena stepped onto her shuttle and sat down heavily. The door closed behind her, and finally, she allowed herself to smile. She pressed a button on her communication device. Director Chen, she said. They said no. On Earth, deep beneath the Himalayan mountains. Director Marcus Chen received the message. He stood in a massive underground facility that stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of people worked at computer stations, monitoring screens filled with data and images. Understood, Ambassador, Chen replied. Come home. We're moving forward. He ended the call and turned to face his command staff, generals from every nation on Earth. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to a single purpose, all of them waiting for this moment. 300 years, Chen said, walking slowly past the massive window that looked out over the facility's main floor. 300 years they have kept us locked in this system. They call us primitive. They call us dangerous. They treat us like animals in a cage. He stopped and faced his officers. What they don't understand is that we have been using this time. Every year they denied us, we grew stronger. Every insult they threw at us, we turned into fuel. They thought they were punishing us. They were wrong. General Sero Conquo stepped forward. She was the commander of Earth's secret military forces. Forces that officially did not exist. Sir, all units are ready. The fleet is standing by. We have 1,700 ships hidden in the outer system. Another 3,000 in construction. Weapons systems are fully operational. Chen nodded. And the technology? Dr. Wei, the head of Earth's reverse engineering program, answered. We cracked their faster-than-light drives 40 years ago. Shield technology, 60 years ago. Our weapons now match or exceed anything the Council has. They never bothered to check on us properly. They were too arrogant. Chen smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had waited his entire life for something. The Council thinks we are weak, he said. They think we are alone and helpless. They have no idea what humanity can do when it is united, when it has a common enemy, when it has a reason to fight. He walked to the main display screen and pressed a button. A map of the galaxy appeared. Earth was marked as a tiny dot on the edge. The Council's territory spread across thousands of star systems. They control most of the galaxy. Chen continued. 47 species, thousands of worlds, the largest military force ever assembled. And they made one terrible mistake. He turned to face his people. They gave us 300 years to prepare. They made every human on Earth hate them. They united our entire species against a common enemy. And now they are going to give us the one thing we have always needed. General Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. And what is that, sir? Chen's eyes were cold. A reason. A legitimate reason to show the galaxy what humanity truly is. We could never attack first. We could never be the aggressors. But when they come for us, when they try to take our freedom, we will have every right to defend ourselves. He pressed another button, and the screen changed. It now showed a document. Protocol Prometheus. The plan that Earth had been building for 3 centuries. We don't just want to win a war. Chen explained. We want to change everything. We want a seat at their table. We want respect. We want the right to spread across the stars like every other species. And the only way to get those things is to make them fear us first. He looked at each person in the room. The Council will come for us soon. They always plan to. They were just waiting for the right excuse. And when they come, we will be ready. Deep in space, Ambassador Vasquez's shuttle flew toward Earth. She looked out the window at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was already planning humanity's final punishment. They would come with their massive fleets. They would expect an easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Elena closed her eyes and thought about her daughter, her granddaughter, all the generations of humans who had lived under the Council's boot. Soon, that would change. Soon, humanity would finally get what it had always wanted. Not peace, not acceptance. A chance to prove itself. The stars seemed to shine brighter as the shuttle carried her home. The merchant ship Horizon's Hope was a simple vessel. It carried food, medicine, and basic supplies between Earth and the few trading stations where humans were allowed to do business. Captain David Reyes had made this trip hundreds of times. It was boring work, but it was honest. He never expected to die doing it. The Vellani warship appeared from nowhere. It was sleek and deadly, covered in weapons that glowed with blue energy. Captain Reyes tried to send a distress signal, but the aliens jammed all communications. Human vessel, a cold voice said over the radio. You are in violation of Council shipping regulations. Prepare to be boarded. Reyes knew there was no violation. His ship was exactly where it was supposed to be. But it didn't matter. The Vellani did whatever they wanted. The Council never punished them for harassing human ships. We are in full compliance with all regulations, Reyes replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Please check our documentation. The Vellani captain laughed. Your documentation means nothing, human. Your entire species means nothing. The first shot hit the Horizon's Hope in the engine section. The second destroyed the life support systems. Captain Reyes had just enough time to look at the picture of his family on his console. Before the third shot tore through the bridge, 32 humans died that day. 32 people who had done nothing wrong. 32 lives ended because the Vellani were bored and knew they would never face consequences. They were wrong. When news of the attack reached Earth, Director Chen called an emergency meeting. But it was not to plan revenge. It was to plan something much more clever. This is it, he told his staff. This is the excuse we needed. But we have to be careful. We cannot look like the aggressors. We must make them strike first. Ambassador Vasquez was called back to the Council chamber. But this time, she did not come to ask for membership. She came to demand justice. 32 citizens of Earth were murdered, she said, her voice echoing through the Great Hall. We have evidence. We have recordings. The Vellani attacked without warning and destroyed an unarmed merchant vessel. The Vellani representative shifted in his seat. His scales turned a nervous shade of yellow. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. The human ship was acting suspiciously. Our captain believed it was a threat. A threat? Vasquez's voice was ice cold. A ship carrying medical supplies, children's medicine, food for elderly patients. The chamber was silent. Even species that hated humans looked uncomfortable. Murder was still murder, even when the victims were humans. High Arbiter Shurath raised his hand for silence. What does Earth request as compensation? Vasquez straightened her shoulders. Justice under council law. The Villani captain must face trial. And as she paused, making sure everyone was listening. Full membership rights for humanity. If we are to be bound by council law, we must also be protected by it. The chamber exploded in noise. Aliens shouted at each other. Some demanded that Earth be punished for its arrogance. Others argued that the Villani should face consequences. Shurath had to call for order 3 times before the room quieted. Full membership is not possible. He said slowly, humanity remains unsuitable. Vasquez nodded as if she expected this answer. Then we reject the council's authority over us. If we cannot receive justice, we are not bound by your laws. We will protect ourselves. This time, the silence was complete. No species had ever challenged the council so directly. Not in 10,000 years. Shurath's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening the Galactic Council, Ambassador? I am stating facts, Vasquez replied. Earth will no longer accept second-class status. Either we are full members with full rights, or we are nothing to you. And if we are nothing, then your laws mean nothing to us. She turned and walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. Behind her, chaos erupted. 1 week later, High Arbiter Shurath appeared on every screen on Earth. His holographic image towered over cities. His voice broadcast to every home, every device, every human being on the planet. People of Earth, he announced, your government has chosen defiance over peace. Your ambassador has insulted the Galactic Council and rejected our authority. This cannot be allowed. Director Chen watched from his underground facility. His heart was beating fast, but his face showed nothing. Therefore, Shurath continued. The Council has voted unanimously. Earth will be disarmed. Your government will be dissolved. Your species will be placed under direct Council administration. For a period of no less than 1,000 years, across Earth, people stopped what they were doing. They looked up at the alien face in the sky. Some were afraid, but many others felt something different rising in their chests, anger. A fleet of 12,000 warships will arrive in your system within 3 weeks, Shurath said. You will not resist. Resistance will only increase your punishment. Accept your fate, humans. Accept your place. The transmission ended. For a moment, the world was silent. Then Director Chen stood and walked to his command console. Every military leader on Earth was waiting for his orders. Send our response, he said quietly. Earth's reply was broadcast on the same frequency Shurath had used. It was seen by every species in the galaxy. For simple words that would change history forever. Come and take them. In the days that followed, something happened that the Council had never seen before. Human nations that had argued for centuries suddenly united. Old enemies shook hands. Resources flowed freely between countries. Every factory switched to military production. Every scientist joined the war effort. The Council had made a terrible mistake. They thought threatening humanity would break them. Instead, it had done something far more dangerous that it had given them a common enemy. Shurath received reports about Earth's response with confusion. His advisors told him that humans were actually celebrating. They were preparing for war with enthusiasm, not fear. Soldiers were volunteering faster than they could be trained. They are insane, the Villani representative said during an emergency council meeting. They cannot possibly think they can win. Shurath was not so sure. He was old enough to remember the ancient warnings about humans, the psychological profiles that describe them as unpredictable, relentless, and incredibly dangerous when threatened. But it was too late now. The Council had committed to war. 12,000 ships were already on their way to Earth. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history was about to face a species that had been preparing for this exact moment for 300 years on Earth. Humanity watched the stars and waited. Their ships were hidden. Their weapons were ready. Their hearts were full of a fire that had been building for generations. The Galactic Council had finally given humanity what it always wanted, a reason to fight back. Admiral Yu Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the enemy fleet enter the solar system. 12,000 warships. The sensors showed them as a cloud of red dots, so thick they almost blocked out the stars. Beautiful, isn't it? She said softly. Her second in command, Commander James Wright, looked at her with concern. Admiral, perhaps a different word would be more appropriate. No. Yu Chen replied with a small smile. Beautiful is exactly right. For 300 years, we have waited for this, prepared for this, dreamed of this, and now it is finally happening. She turned to face her crew. The bridge was filled with men and women who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Their faces showed no fear, only determination. Send the signal, she ordered. Wake up the wolves. Across the outer solar system, hidden bases came to life. Asteroid fields that had seemed empty suddenly revealed thousands of human warships. Moons that had appeared dead lit up with weapons platforms. The entire system had been turned into a trap. The Council fleet commander was a Kavari named Verton. He was considered one of the best military minds in the galaxy. He had won 100 battles without ever losing a ship. When his sensors detected the human fleet, he felt his first moment of doubt. Where did they get these ships? He demanded. Our intelligence said they had less than 50 vessels. His officers had no answer. The human fleet was massive. Worse, their ships looked advanced, sleek, deadly. Nothing like the primitive vessels the Council expected. It does not matter, Verton decided. We outnumber them. We have more experience. We will crush them. He gave the order to attack. His ships moved forward in perfect formation, just as they had in every battle for the last 1,000 years. Council tactics were proven. Council discipline was unmatched. Council fleets never lost. That was about to change. The first sign that something was wrong came when human fighters launched from their carriers. The small ships moved differently than anything Verton had ever seen. They twisted and turned at angles that should have killed their pilots. They accelerated so fast that his tracking systems could barely follow them. How are they doing that? One of his officers asked. Those maneuvers would crush any living being. The answer was simple. Human bodies could survive forces that would kill most alien species. Their bones were denser. Their muscles were stronger. Their hearts could pump blood even under extreme stress. And more importantly, they were willing to push themselves to the very edge of death if it meant victory. Council pilots flew carefully. They protected themselves. They followed safety rules created over thousands of years. Human pilots flew like they didn't care if they lived or died. The first wave of Council ships disappeared in balls of fire. Their shields, which should have protected them, failed under weapons that hit harder than anything in Council records. Human ships didn't just attack. They swarmed. They worked together like a single living creature, covering each other, sacrificing themselves to create openings for their allies. Verton watched in horror as his perfect formation crumbled. Fall back. Regroup. But there was no falling back. The humans followed. They chased. They hunted. On the Defiance, Admiral Yu Chen coordinated the battle with cold precision. But she also watched the enemy with curiosity. After 1,000 years of peace, Council species had forgotten what real war looked like. They fought like it was a game with rules. Humans had no such illusions. Target their flagship, she ordered. Show them what we can do. A squadron of human ships broke through the enemy lines. They flew straight toward Verton's command vessel, ignoring the defensive fire that should have destroyed them. 2 ships exploded. 3 more were badly damaged. But the rest kept coming. Verton tried to run. His flagship turned, its engines pushing to maximum power. But the humans were faster. They caught him in minutes. Surrender. Admiral Yu Chen's voice came over his communication system. And your crew will live. Verton looked at his officers. They were terrified. In all the history of the Galactic Council, no species had ever fought like this. The humans were supposed to be primitive, weak, easy to defeat. Instead, they were monsters. I surrender, Verton said quietly. Please, stop. The Battle of Titan lasted 6 hours. Council tacticians had expected it to take 2 days. Instead, the greatest military force ever assembled was broken in less than a morning. Human losses were heavy. Thousands of soldiers died. Hundreds of ships were destroyed. But the Council fleet was devastated. More than half their ships were captured or destroyed. The rest fled in panic, leaving their allies behind. News of the defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had laughed at humanity suddenly fell silent. Politicians who had voted to attack Earth began to worry about their own safety. But the worst part was yet to come. 1 week after the Battle of Titan, Admiral Yu Chen received new orders from Director Chen. She read them twice to make sure she understood. "We're not staying here," she told her officers. "We're going after them." For the first time in galactic history, a species the Council called primitive was taking the war to Council space. Human fleets gathered at the edge of the solar system. The captured enemy ships had been repaired and added to their numbers. New weapons were installed. Fresh soldiers were ready. The Council thought they could lock us in our cage forever. Admiral Yu Chen announced to all human forces. They thought they could attack us without consequences. They were wrong. She pointed at the stars. Out there are the species that laughed at us. The politicians who called us animals. The generals who thought we would be easy to kill. They started this war. We are going to finish it. The human fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. Their destination was Valandi space. The species that had murdered Captain Reyes and his crew. The species that had laughed loudest when humans asked for membership. They were about to discover that humanity had a very long memory, and absolutely no mercy for those who drew first blood. Back on Earth, Director Chen watched the fleet depart. He allowed himself a moment of pride. 300 years of planning, 300 years of patience, and now, finally, the wolves were loose. The galaxy would never be the same. The Valandi colony of New Brightness was a beautiful world. Blue oceans, green forests, cities that floated in the sky on anti-gravity platforms. 2 million people lived there in peace and comfort. They had never known war. Not real war. When human ships appeared in their sky, the colony governor thought it was a mistake. Surely the humans could not have traveled this far. Surely the Council fleet had stopped them. Then the first transmission came through. "This is Admiral Yu Chen of the United Earth Navy," a calm female voice announced. "Your government attacked our people. Your species murdered innocent humans. We are here to collect what is owed." The governor scrambled to organize a defense. The colony had a small security force, a few old patrol ships, nothing that could stop an invasion. But the invasion never came. Not the way he expected. Human ships surrounded the planet, but did not fire. They disabled the communication satellites and the orbital defense platforms with precise strikes. Then they waited. "We do not want to hurt your people," Admiral Yu Chen continued. "We are not like the Council. We do not murder civilians. Surrender your colony, and everyone lives. Your government will negotiate your return. Fight, and we will take this world anyway. The choice is yours." The governor looked at his advisors. They were all terrified. The humans had destroyed the greatest fleet in galactic history. What chance did a small colony have? "We surrender," the governor announced. Human soldiers landed on New Brightness the next day. They were disciplined and professional. They set up bases outside the cities. They established supply lines. They treated the Valandi civilians with respect. But they also made one thing very clear. This world now belonged to humanity. For how long depended entirely on the Council. Across the galaxy, the same scene repeated itself. Human fleets appeared at colony after colony. Trade stations, mining operations, industrial centers. Each time, they offered the same choice. Surrender peacefully or be conquered violently. Most chose peace. High Arbiter Shurath received reports of each loss with growing despair. In just 2 months, humanity had captured more than 30 star systems. Not through destruction, but through fear. The Council's citizens had lost faith in their government's ability to protect them. "This is impossible," the Kavari representative said during an emergency council meeting. "How can they move so fast? How do they know where to strike?" The answer was painfully simple. Humans learned. Every battle taught them something new. Every captured ship was studied and copied. Every piece of enemy technology was taken apart and improved. What took the Council species thousands of years to develop, humans figured out in weeks. But there was something else. Something that Council psychologists struggled to explain. "They fight differently than us," one expert reported. "They sacrifice themselves for each other. Not because they are ordered to, but because they choose to." They form bonds with their units that go beyond simple loyalty. They call it brotherhood. Shurath did not understand this concept. Council species fought for pay, for duty, for fear of punishment. The idea of dying for someone else by choice was alien to them, but it made humans terrifying. A soldier who fights for money will run when the price becomes too high. A soldier who fights for brotherhood will die before abandoning his friends. And an army of such soldiers was nearly impossible to defeat. Ambassador Vasquez had been moved from Earth to a captured Council space station. She now commanded humanity's diplomatic efforts from the heart of enemy territory. When Shurath's request for peace talks arrived, she made him wait 3 days before responding. Earth will discuss terms, she finally replied. But first, we need to talk about our membership application. The council chamber was nearly empty when negotiations began. Many representatives had fled to distant systems. Others were too ashamed to show their faces. Only a handful remained, including Shurath and the Velani ambassador, whose scales had turned a permanent shade of gray. Director Chen attended via hologram. He had refused to travel to council space in person. I have work to do, he explained. Rebuilding takes priority over talking. Shurath began the meeting with what he thought was a reasonable offer. The council will grant humanity limited membership, restricted colonization rights, a voice in minor decisions. In exchange, you will return all captured territories and pay reparations for the damage you have caused. Chen laughed. It was not a kind laugh. You started this war, he said slowly. You attacked our people. You tried to enslave our species. And now you want us to pay you? The Velani ambassador shifted nervously. Perhaps there is room for negotiation. There is, Chen agreed. But not the kind you imagine. Here are Earth's terms. Full membership with all rights and privileges. Unlimited colonization in any unclaimed space. A permanent seat on the High Arbiter's Council. And one more thing. He leaned forward, his holographic image seeming to grow larger. We want the right to be called upon. Shurath blinked all 4 of his eyes. Called upon? For what? You know exactly what, Chen replied. The things out there, beyond the rim, the dead civilizations, the warnings your ancestors recorded. You kept us locked away because you knew someday you would need soldiers willing to fight the real enemy. Soldiers who don't break, who don't run, who will stand between the galaxy and whatever killed all those species before. The chamber was silent. These were secrets that junior species were never supposed to know. You were never protecting the galaxy from us, Chen continued. You were saving us, keeping the weapons sharp until you needed them. Shurath was old. He had lived through many crises, but he had never felt so completely defeated. And if we refuse these terms? He asked quietly. Chen's eyes were cold. Then we keep taking your colonies. We keep destroying your fleets. We keep pushing until there is nothing left of your precious council. And when the darkness finally comes from beyond the rim, you will face it alone. The Velani ambassador made a sound that might have been a sob. His people had started this war with their arrogance. Now they face the consequences. We need time to discuss, Shurath said finally. You have 1 week, Chen replied. After that, we resume our advance. The hologram disappeared. Ambassador Vasquez remained seated as the council members argued among themselves. She thought about her grandmother, who had stood in this very chamber and been laughed at. Her mother, who had been denied 1,000 times. All the generations of humans who had suffered under council rule. Now, finally, the terms had changed. Humanity was no longer asking for permission. They were telling the galaxy how things would be. The Treaty of Arcturus was signed on a space station that had belonged to the council for 10,000 years. Now it served as neutral ground, floating between human territory and what remained of council space. Director Chen arrived in person this time. He wore a simple black uniform with no medals or decorations. Behind him stood Admiral Yu Chen and Ambassador Vasquez, 3 humans who had changed the galaxy forever. High Arbiter Shurath waited at the signing table. He looked older than ever. The weight of defeat had aged him more than centuries of life. Behind him sat representatives from all 47 council species. Many could not meet the human's eyes. The treaty document was massive. Hundreds of pages covering everything from borders to trade to military cooperation. But the most important parts could be summarized simply. Humanity would receive full membership in the Galactic Council. They could colonize any unclaimed world. They would have a permanent voice in all major decisions. And they would be recognized as equals to any species in the galaxy. After 300 years, humans were finally free. But there was one clause that confused every alien diplomat in the room. Humanity had demanded the right to be called upon in times of crisis. Not just allowed to help, but expected to. Required to. Shurath signed his name to the document and looked at Director Chen with tired eyes. "I do not understand," he admitted. "You could have demanded tribute. You could have taken our worlds permanently. You could have dissolved the council and ruled the galaxy yourselves. Instead, you ask for obligations, responsibilities. Why?" Chen set down his pen after signing. He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the stars through the station's massive windows. "For 300 years, he began slowly. You told us we weren't ready. Too young, too violent, too dangerous. You locked us in our home system and watched us like dangerous animals. You pretended we didn't exist except when you wanted someone to look down on." The council representatives shifted uncomfortably. They had heard these words before. They expected anger, blame, demands for revenge. Instead, Chen surprised them. "But we knew you were hiding something. Our scientists studied every scrap of information we could find. Our spies listened to every conversation. And eventually, we learned the truth." He turned to face Shurath directly. "The silence beyond the rim, the hundreds of dead civilizations, the warnings your ancestors recorded 10,000 years ago. Something killed them, something powerful enough to destroy entire species. And it's still out there." The chamber was completely silent. This was the Council's greatest secret. The knowledge that the galaxy was not safe, that somewhere in the darkness between stars, something waited. "You weren't protecting the galaxy from us," Chen continued. "You were saving us for later, keeping the attack dogs locked up until you needed them. A species violent enough, stubborn enough, and crazy enough to fight whatever comes out of that darkness." Shurath said nothing. There was nothing to say. The human was right. "So here's what we really want," Chen said. "Not revenge, not conquest. We want a seat at your table, a voice in your decisions. We want to know everything you know about the threat beyond the rim. And when it finally comes, we want to be on the front lines." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You spent 300 years treating us like monsters. Fine. Now you get to point us at something that deserves it." The treaty was signed. The war was officially over. But everyone in that room understood that a different kind of war was coming. One that would make the conflict between Earth and the Council look like a small disagreement. Ambassador Vasquez stood beside Director Chen as they walked back to their shuttle. "Do you think they'll accept us?" she asked. "Really accept us, I mean. Not just because they're afraid." Chen thought about it for a moment. "It doesn't matter. We're not doing this for their acceptance. We're doing it for humanity, for our children and grandchildren, so that when the darkness comes, Earth will be ready." He looked back at the space station, where Council diplomats were already arguing about how to implement the treaty. "Besides," he added, "fear is a good place to start. Respect can come later." 50 years passed. Director Chen died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. He was remembered as the man who freed humanity from its cage. Admiral Yu Chen retired and wrote books about military history. Ambassador Vasquez became the first human to serve as High Arbiter, leading the Council with wisdom and strength. Humanity spread across the stars. They built colonies on 1,000 worlds. They traded with species that had once laughed at them. They made friends and enemies and everything in between. But they never forgot why they had fought, why they had sacrificed, what was waiting for them in the darkness. The first warning came on a quiet morning. A research station at the edge of known space detected a signal. It was faint, ancient, and it matched the death screams of 100 extinct civilizations. Something was waking up. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all species gathered in the Great Chamber, their faces showing fear that had been forgotten for generations. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before them. She was the granddaughter of the late director, and she had inherited his cold determination. Her black uniform carried the wolf insignia of the United Earth Navy for 50 years. "Humanity has been part of this council," she said. "We have traded with you, worked with you. Some of us have even made friends with you. But we always knew this day would come." She activated the display behind her. It showed the edge of known space, the darkness beyond, and the faint signals coming from something that should not exist. The enemy is waking up. Whatever killed those ancient civilizations is coming. And now you need to ask yourselves a question. She looked at each representative in turn. Valani, Kavari, Murdeshi, species that had once mocked humanity, species that had tried to destroy them. "You spent centuries asking if humanity was ready to join you," Admiral Chen said. But that was the wrong question. The display changed. It showed human fleets positioned along the rim. 10,000 warships, 200 fortress worlds, an entire species that had spent 300 years preparing for a war they were denied, now preparing for a war that actually mattered. "The question you should have asked," she continued, "is whether the galaxy was ready for us, for the first time in 10,000 years. The Galactic Council answered as one voice, not with fear, not with doubt, with hope, because whatever was coming from the darkness, whatever had destroyed countless civilizations before, it had never faced anything like humanity. A species that refused to die, that grew stronger under pressure, that treated impossible odds as a personal challenge. The wolves of Earth were finally off their leash, and they were hungry for a real fight." High Arbiter Vasquez, old now but still sharp, watched Admiral Chen with pride. 3 generations of humans had worked for this moment, not just to be accepted by the galaxy, not just to be respected, but to be needed. "Send the signal," she ordered. "Tell all Council species to prepare for war. Tell them Earth will lead the defense. Tell them," she smiled, remembering her grandmother's stories about the first time humans had asked for membership. "Tell them humanity is finally where it belongs." The stars seemed brighter that day, as if the galaxy itself was watching, waiting. The darkness was coming, but so were the humans, and the humans were ready.